Sorry, this place should be free because I'm streaming.
Harry, your backpack. 오빠 가방 어딨어? Harry, go get your backpack.
You left it in there?
No, I couldn't bring it. I had to go get my bag too.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Where's the baby girl? Dude, NATO isn't affiliated with the UN. We are? Like, no, I'm in
Okay, can everybody hear me for a second? Okay, first we're going to check the networks here very quickly. Al-Jalil, Amsterdam, AHLA, AHLB, Belarus, Canada, BSPP, or North America. Okay. Canada Dallaire, Canada Humphrey, Canada Pearson, Anders, Estonia, Haiti, Hunter, Japan, Kosovo 1, Kosovo 2, Lithuania, Pakistan A, Pakistan B, Beach, Beach, Beach. Please call them Russia, Serbia?
Here.
Slovakia? Solid as a rock? Team 36? Team 37? Team 38? Kyrgyzstan, Mambayev, Isanova, Sirikov? Texas? Tunisia 1, Tunisia 2, Panama and France, USB, Vietnam, and Macedonia. Oh. So we're waiting for Team Peaks to show up. Can Rita come to the front? Could Rita come to the front? Rita, join the front. Yeah.
We're just going to be delayed by a couple of seconds to entertain you. Manus is going to dance.
Not happening. You really don't want it. Yeah, we do Sitaki workshops during the electives night. Before we get started, we've had a couple of questions about the order of motions from the programs. This is kind of important. The motions will be ordered the way we publish them on our website, which means the first prepared motion that you will be debating regards actively circumventing internet censorship as a legitimate foreign policy tool. The second prepared motion for rounds 5 and 6 will be universities should make all academic work they produce, including scholarly articles, course handbooks, and recorded lectures, available to the general public. Is that clear? Excellent. Even though you know the motion already and you're going to see the side, it would be nice if while leaving the room you didn't disturb others that are trying to see which rooms they're in. So if we could all be polite and watch the entire draw go by and then leave the lecture theatre. How does that sound? Excellent? Is Pete's here? You're calling them. Okay, cool. In the meantime...
Okay, get out of my way. Can you talk to the principal? Okay, one or two things before we get around. Firstly, does everyone have their meal card? You have your cards to get your dinner? Yeah? Can everyone take their meal card out?
If you don't have your meal card, it may have been found by Mary. While your meal card is out, take a pen and write your name on it.
I wanted to do that. Tony spoils always. Can you write your name on your card so if you do lose your card, we know where to find you? On my walk over this morning, I found one room key from Card Village. If you lose your key to your accommodation, you have to go to reception to get a replacement key. We can't replace your keys. So if you don't have the key to your apartment and to your room, please go to reception. The other thing in relation to the accommodation is in your apartments, there are either 4 or 3 rooms that have numbers on the doors. The room that doesn't have a number on the door but has a receptacle for your key that you can swipe it into, that is your kitchen and living room. So you can use those rooms as well, and anybody's room key will open that door. Some people weren't sure whether or not they could use those rooms. Some people weren't sure whether or not they had those rooms. All of your apartments have a kitchen and a living room with couches and a TV that you can use in the evenings. You can use for prep with your team. You can put stuff in the fridge. You can mix yourself some toast. You can look out the window and wave at other people. You can do whatever you want within the realms of legality. The third thing is in relation to tours. You have information in your tour book about tours, but to give you some more kind of clues or for hints. The first one is a tour that is going to the cliffs of Moher, to the Burren, to the town where I come from, which is called Kinvara, which is one of the most beautiful towns in Ireland, on the coast, big castle called Dungura, really, really pretty. The second tour is going to Connemara. Connemara is probably, everyone who comes to Ireland goes to see the cliffs of Moher, and obviously you go see the cliffs of Moher because they're amazing. Not that many people have the opportunity to go to Connemara. Connemara is a really beautiful, rugged area of Ireland. It's where people speak the Irish language most frequently. We've filmed a couple of movies out there, like The Quiet Man with John Wayne. Really, really interesting scenery, really beautiful place to visit. So I would suggest that you do one of those two. If you don't want to take a full day away from the university, if you want to work with your team for the MTT, if you just want to sleep in a little bit, you can do the walking tour of Galway, where we'll have a guide who will bring you around and show you some of the sites like the Spanish Arch, the street where shops are on, which is called Shop Street, the street that is in the middle of two other streets, which is called Middle Street, the street where the university is, which is called University Road, the street that leads to the Newcastle, which is called Newcastle Road. We're very literal in terms of our naming in Galway. But Galway is a really nice city if you don't want to do a full day tour away. We do need to have the details of which tour you want to do before dinner on Friday, because we need to contact, or dinner on Thursday, because we need to contact the bus company to make sure there's space for you all. At the minute, we have pretty much a full bus for the Burren tour. We can put on multiple buses for individual tours. So don't let the fact that the sign-up sheet is nearly full put you off signing up. But we do need to get 30 people in order to be able to send the tour to Connemara. So if you are signing up for Connemara, at the minute, not very many people. In fact, I don't think any people have. So that might be a tour that we cut, and instead we'll ask you to go to the Burren. Any questions in relation to tours? Any questions in relation to anything else? You think that meal card? No, we don't. No, it's a room card rather than a meal card. Do we have a meal card? We have a meal card. You can get that from the info desk.
Somebody else, somebody else may have already claimed it too. So
if you have lost your meal cards, go to the info desk. I cannot stress enough how much you shouldn't lose your meal cards. Because we need to feed you or you die. You won't actually die at the forum. You can survive about 16 days without food if you're not getting any other nutrition. Water is more important. The final thing is in relation to your forum t-shirts. Those have been delivered. They will be given out at the info desk. We are still deciding when we will do that, whether it will be after the second round and during dinner but before the movie, or if it will be tomorrow morning as you're coming across for breakfast. I will update you on that before the second round. Any other questions? Do we have the map? From Clyde. Do we have?
So we are also going to find out here in a few minutes about the Country Expo. We know we have a sound system. If you want your music played, get it to me.
When?
As soon as possible. Between rounds, on breaks, bring a memory stick, and we'll get it on my computer or bring a CD. Okay? If you have a dance or a song you'd like accompaniment to, bring that to me. Is that clear? Yes. As soon as you can, because it's tomorrow night. And I'll have more details about setup and those things tomorrow morning.
Okay, so one other thing in relation to Twitter. I've done a quick calculation, and I think of everybody who is on Twitter tweets at least 3 times today using the hashtag GYF2013. I'm pretty sure we can get the Global Youth Forum trending in Ireland. So if you're on Twitter, just take a photo of somebody, put it on Twitter, get their permission first. Don't take photos of random people. Take a photo of Tony, take a photo of Ava. Who's not here? Where's Ava? She's up there. Ah, there's Ava. She's the only reason I haven't killed you all yet. We're just waiting for someone to email us across a campus map so we can show you where the rooms will be located. We do have signs that will direct you to each of the debate rooms. Those rooms are marked on the rooms as well. We have people who can answer questions if you've got any problems, but it's pretty simple. We're using this building along this corridor. It's very echoey. We're using this building along this corridor. We're using the Information Technology building, which is one building behind here, and we're using the Arts Millennium building, which is directly across from the restaurant where you have your meals. But we'll show you on the map as soon as I get it across, and that will make life a little bit easier.
Sonia, qual é meu foto? Víte, pedestrian
Okay, so this is the map of the NUIGOA campus. This here is the restaurant area where we have food. We're currently in this lecture theatre, the Kerwin Lecture Theatre. This is the main announcement room. The rooms that we're using for debates are along this front corridor, which is when you come outside, it's the corridor with the glass wall directly in front of you. The teaching rooms are all marked, and the lecture theatres are all marked as well, so there's signs that will direct you to where you're going. If you have a debate room that is in the IT building, when you come out from the Kerwin Lecture Theatre, so when you come out this door, you turn to your left, and you walk down this corridor, which will bring you directly into the Information Technology building. Those rooms are all on that level of the IT building, and they've all also been marked. So if your room is in this building, it will either be a lecture theatre name, or it will be an AC room. So AC 201, AC 202, AC 214. And they're arranged along here from the first teaching room that isn't the lecture theatre is 201, and they go down as you go closer to the bank and around the corner of the bank, the numbers increase. If you're in the IT building, it will be IT 125, IT 204, IT 250, IT 125G maybe. Those are all in the IT building and they're also marked. If your debating room has the prefix AM, you're in the Arts Millennium room. I'll come to you in 1 second, let me finish explaining this first. You'll be in the Arts Millennium building, which is directly across the courtyard from the restaurant. So you leave this building through the front door at the top of the stairs, walk across where the 4 boxes are that let light into the canteen, and then you enter the Arts Millennium building, which is directly across. Those those rooms are all AM, and 1 numbers are all across the bottom. The lecture theatres are called the Ohoka, the Fotrel, the Okmuhik, and there's a 4th in the Arts Millennium building that we're using, is there? They're all on the 1st floor, so there's stairs on the right-hand side of that building that will bring you to the lecture theatres. If it's a numbered room, it's on the ground floor on the left-hand side. You have a question?
I feel lost when you explained. I didn't understand anything. Where is it there, no?
Where what?
I didn't understand. Like, would please somebody take us to the rooms? Because this is, take the stairs to go this way, round and around that road.
No, we don't have enough staff to bring you all to rooms. We can't bring each debate to rooms, okay? So I'll go through it once more.
Please be quiet and listen.
You all have maps that you can write on in your welcome packs, which you have with you, okay? So we are currently here. AC rooms are in this building. Lecture theatres are all signposted. And the teaching rooms, so AC 201 up, are down this corridor before you get to where we had the opening ceremony last night. They continue around to here where it's called Buildings Geography, but those are signposted. So if your room is AC, you're in this building. If it's a numbered room, 201 up, you're here or here. If you're in a lecture theatre, they're all along the front here. Is that clear? If you have an IT room, you leave this lecture theatre and turn left and follow this corridor, which will bring you to the IT building. Is that clear? If you're in an AM room, you come out of the lecture theatre, you leave this building, walk across the roof of the canteen, which is directly in front of you, and this is the Arts Millennium building, which is the large grey white building that's directly across from here. In the Arts Millennium building, numbered rooms, so AM 101 to AM 110, are on the ground floor on the right-hand side. Lecture theatres are on the first floor on the left-hand side. They're the O'Cnual, the Fottrell, and the O'Hucca. Okay? Are there any questions about getting where you're going now? If you're confused, like I said, we have signs up outside. There are signs on all of the rooms that will show you when you've gotten there. We haven't changed signage for the university. So the names that you will see are the names that staff and students on campus will know for these buildings. If you get lost, Galway people are friendly until provoked, so you can ask people for directions. Are there any questions? Excellent.
After the draw is on, judges please come to the front to pick up your ballots.
Could everyone please remain seated until the draw is over?
Please sit down until the draw has passed.
Okay, these debates will start as soon as possible. Please make your way to your rooms.
Good luck.
Can everyone be careful if you're down the front of the leads for the cameras?
Alexander?
Watch the cables, guys, watch the cables.
Sanya?
Watch the kid.
Ilias? Alternate.
Як звати вибили? Леніцева.
debate here.
Alexander Kostikov, Kranti Diefan, Muhammad Ali Shaban, and Haitham Khatib.
Bring them upstairs, get the runners to bring them to the room.
Oh, and Ilyas
He's my roommate. Just to say hello to him. He's here. He's not.
Excuse me, we're debating here. Where are we supposed to
Oh, that's Haitham. Haitham is over there. Haitham.
You're judging in here. Can you just move back up maybe 2 rows of the team? Just in this row here. Wherever on that. Are you out for neg?
Neg.
So over that side, wherever you want to sit.
Guys, let's go, let's go.
Guys, you can sit in anywhere down here. But I think the rest of your judges should be along this. You guys are good?
You want it?
Debating here.
Oh, you're debating here. Cool, fantastic.
I'm in 8M.
Dominic, you're judging here?
What's number?
Cool. You have your panel?
100.
Yep.
1 to 2.
Mano,
Yes?
can you put the website up?
But
Yeah, the reason we found that oh no, my stuff is like where's my file? No, it's like up there. All my stuff is in it.
no.
Sorry, where I can receive judge ballot?
Where can you see what?
Judge ballot.
What? Judge ballot. It's going to your room.
I don't know my room.
Where will you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Art and Learning Building.
Oh, I wish I could talk to Mohammed. Like, I don't know why he called himself Mohammed, but that's not even his name. Ask blocks, make blocks. Me too. Oh, before you cut off, hit it, I did it. Wow, I told you. You said I was wrong. No, you said everything I said was wrong. But it isn't. I already have it. What is it? Oh, yeah. Okay, and these are the cards, guys. Yeah. Okay, so this is all evidence. Yeah. And then cross down and just bring this up. Is there a second goal? Summon.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to the first round of KPDC. Where is your third?
Right there.
Ah, okay. And just to make sure that we have your team right, so you're Team North America, and you have Linda, Christina, and Sunmin. Sunmin on your team. Okay. And the negative team is Team Tunisia. Okay. I'm gonna time you, so I'm gonna show you the time remaining, And this is half minute left of your speech. This is that your time is up. And if you exceed more than 30 minutes more, I will just keep doing this. Do you have any questions before we start? No. All right. So I'd like to invite the first affirmative speaker to present their case.
Secrecy is the keystone of all tyranny, not force but secrecy, censorship. When any government or any church for that matter undertakes to say to its subjects, this you may not read, this you must not see, this you are forbidden to know, the end result is tyranny and oppression no matter how holy the motives. Affirmative. Because we believe that the rights of the individual precedes the rights of dictatorial regimes, we are very proud to propose the motion that actively circumventing internet censorship is a legitimate foreign policy tool. We believe that in order to prove this resolution, we have to prove two burdens. The first being that human rights will improve, and the second being that it is justified to violate national sovereignty in certain cases. Likewise, the opposition does have the burden to prove that 1, the right to national sovereignty is absolute, and 2, human rights will not increase with the resolution. So exactly what are we talking about today? Well, we are talking about whether or not circumvention should be legitimate, just like other foreign policy tools that are deemed justified by the United Nations, like economic sanctions and like military intervention. So today I'll be giving you 3 lines of analysis. 1, the problems in the status quo. 2, advancements to human rights. And 3, the justification to the violation of sovereignty. Because before we explain to you exactly how we'll uphold these burdens, we'll begin by defining some terms. Actively circumventing means providing the citizens of a nation with information previously suppressed by the government. Internet censorship is the reading of communication and deleting material considered sensitive or harmful, and to provide context to the resolution, the criteria in which circumvention would occur are in justified cases where there's clear evidence that a government suppresses the population by censoring basic information via the outside world. Now, our first contention is that the current system is not enough. Current problems in the status quo necessitate that circumvention be kept as a tool to be used by states. In many oppressive nations such as Iran and North Korea, the government inappropriately implements censorship to degrade and deprive their own citizens. By utilizing the filtered bubble, which is a representation of the role of censorship in these oppressive regimes, governments restrict and restrain the rights of their citizens. The internet, which offers tools such as social networks and sharing sites, allows for the citizens to gain access to important information and to express their political ideas, which in many cases comes in conflict with the ideas and political outlooks of the governments. In these ways, the internet has proved to be an unprecedented and a disruptive force in some closed societies. Furthermore, as a consequence of the circumvention, by providing access to information and communication is an important mechanism that can be used to protect citizens and help create change in these oppressive regimes. In Burma, during the 2007 Saffron Revolution, for example, YouTube footage filmed by cell phone cameras conveyed to the world the human rights violations against the monks and generated international awareness and reaction. When an entire nation is in grave danger and the international community is aware of the danger posed to those citizens, it possesses an obligation to use every single tool necessary to help eliminate that threat. When a government does not use every tool necessary to stop harm, especially when the guilt of an oppressive nation is especially compelling, it chooses to do nothing. There have been many cases, such as Cuba and North Korea, in which peace talks, military intervention, and economic sanctions have been ineffective or even counterproductive. And it's for these reasons that circumvention is oftentimes the best and only option. Our second contention is that circumvention actively extends human rights. The promotion of human rights is both a domestic and international objective, and as a foreign policy tool, internet circumvention improves human rights conditions. First, it is important to note the significance of censorship for authoritarian regimes in maintaining power. These governments use excessive censorship because they fully understand that it is a method of control. By knowing and controlling exactly what kind of information enters the population, the government can control the people. When we threaten to circumvent, we're essentially threatening to pop this filtered bubble, which would result in unlimited information to the citizens, and it would significantly decrease the control these governments exert upon the people, which is exactly why circumvention, by directly contesting the mechanism that governments use to exert power, would be such a powerful foreign policy tool. With circumvention as a tool, negotiating terms for changes in human rights violations, oppressive regimes will be provided with one of 2 choices. In the first case, the government maintains power over their citizens, but agrees to the terms of reducing human rights violations, thereby fulfilling the goal of the foreign policy tool. In the second case, the country refuses to the terms, at which point circumvention would destabilize the governments And as the government loses control of its citizens, the citizens would gain the ability to self-actualize and to create change. And for these reasons, circumvention, by allowing for uninhibited access to modern technologies of freedom, which would advance the cause of human rights and the capacity of people to live free from oppression. In this way, circumvention provides impacts and options that are not available with current foreign policy tools. Moreover, an added benefit is the lack of collateral damage that comes with using circumvention when compared to other foreign policy tools. Now, our third and final contention is that the use of circumvention is justified in violating national sovereignty. As the resolution questions the legitimacy of internet circumvention, it is important to note that we are specifically dealing with countries that perpetually violate human rights. According to the UN, state sovereignty applies the primary responsibility for the protection of its peoples, which should lie with the state itself. However, where a population is suffering severe harms through insurgency or repression or state failure, and the state in question is unwilling or unable to call for a verdict, the principle of non-intervention yields the international responsibility to protect. The UN also emphasizes the responsibility of the international community to prevent, meaning to address both the root causes and direct causes of internal conflict and other man-made crises putting populations at risk. And therefore, we can see that to further this idea, we will also identify with the analysis being used in the current justice system that when one violates domestic laws, he is no longer entitled to the full protection under the name of law. Likewise, on an international level, that same policy applies. So what has side affirmative shown you thus far in today's round? We've shown you that there's an inherent problem in society that has yet to be addressed, and that the current foreign policy tools are becoming more and more outdated in today's globalized world. We've shown you that the most basic rights of oppressed citizens will increase with emotion. We've shown you that tyrannical regimes should not have assumptions respected. And for all these reasons, because we believe that the protection of the rights of innocent individuals ought to come before the rights of a dictatorial regime, we strongly affirm the resolution.
2 minutes, okay. Who's the first and the second speaker? So
The first is Linda, second is Christina, third is Simon. Just a question, if you guys were timing our prep time for us?
yeah, we can do it for you. Usually I just let it run and I inform you of how much time you used or how much time you have left. Is that fine? Minutes. Do you need more? No. So you would be which one?
Just the other two.
Oh, so this is not the same.
No, who is it? No, that's Tunisia too, actually.
Okay. So your name, I think, too. So you're Tunisia too.
No, we are Tunisia 1, and the names they gave you are the names of Tunisia 2.
Okay. So can you write it down here?
Okay.
Okay, can you write
Yeah.
the rest. Maybe just write the surnames. If it's,
No, I can. I can write up here because.
Yeah, no, don't.
I write it here because his name is too long.
And do you know the positions? So this is 1, 2, 3.
No. First speaker,
Mm-hmm.
third, and second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi. Would you please repeat your definition of circumventing internet?
Our definition of actively circumventing was providing the citizens of a nation with information previously suppressed by the government.
Okay. Do you think child pornography is harmful?
Yes.
Okay. And do you think that we should allow people to have watch child abuse or child pornography?
No. However, in terms of the resolution, as we clarified in our criterion and in our third contention, we specified that when using foreign policy as a tool, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be using it in every single instance, only in those circumstances in which it's justified, and in the cases of governments who perpetually violate human rights.
Okay, I would like you to tell me what's foreign policy. What does foreign policy mean?
Foreign policy, as we defined, was the mechanism through which a nation is able to advance its domestic objectives with no significant harm to the international community and domestic citizens.
With no significant harm. And you compared internet intervention to armed intervention or to army intervention, and that it was okay with the United Nations. So where intervention like the Iraq war harmful?
Were wars like the, well, again, we have to consider this by circumstantial. In terms of the Iraq war, we have to understand that it wasn't necessarily.
It was harmful, yes or
United
no?
Nations.
Yes or no question.
So again,
it was harmful?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
so
to
you
an
are
extent,
comparing it. So if it's not, it shouldn't be harmful. So if we are interfering in somebody else, it shouldn't be harmful. Where internet could so you are admitting that internet circumvention could be harmful.
Actually, no, what we're saying is that with the foreign policy tool, we're actually going to be solving the problems present in these oppressive nations.
But giving such tools to people can use them in the wrong way, right?
However, with the foreign policy tool, as we've seen in cases of the Saffron Revolution.
Okay, I would like you to tell me how would you control that. I would like you to tell me how would you control that.
We're going to say that we outweigh by the benefits of providing millions of people under an oppressive regime with the right to take control, to have access.
Yes, but do you deny that this circumventing tools could be used by thieves, criminal, child abusers, to steal money from banks, to put pornographic child abuse?
With any
it could be used, yes or no?
Answer your question.
Yes, you can.
So with any
it's a yes or no question.
Sorry, I would like to answer the question.
Yeah.
So with any foreign policy tool, there's benefits and there's risks. And there's no foreign policy tool that exists that doesn't come with the risk. But the fact is, if the benefits of that tool and the lives that it protects outweighs the harms, then in that scenario, again, it is a legitimate foreign policy tool. And again, despite the risk, there is no evidence of this extensive misuse of this tool.
Yeah,
so therefore, again, we're going to outweigh the
okay, you're perfectly talking theoretically. I would love for you.
Actually, I'm talking in a realistic sense. Again, you haven't shown evidence of this widespread misuse of the tool, whereas we've shown the benefits.
I'll just let the time run, okay? I'll just let the time run. Please inform me.
You can just 5 seconds.
Okay. Seconds.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges. So, today our debate, and it is really fact that in debates we have two sides, and it is not possible to talk or debate about a specific topic if it is not controversial. So, I think we all admit that the motion today, which is circumventing internet censorship is a legitimate foreign policy, is controversial. Well, let me tell you something. Most foreign policies that are controversial are aggressive, and I'm not just saying that because studies made by the United Nations and other NGOs has proved that. So we all agree that this policy is aggressive, but is it aggressive enough to be illegitimate, which is actually our motion today, because we are not talking if circumventing internet censorship is right or wrong, but it is a legitimate foreign policy or illegitimate foreign policy. And our team will show you that it is aggressive enough to be illegitimate foreign policy. And the first argument that I'm going to say that such policies are aggressive very much that in some cases they can lead to war and conflicts. Let me explain to you more. Undermining states by circumventing internet censorship is simply a new method of engaging in aggressive actions against another state. NATO has accepted that cyber operations can be considered to constitute an armed conflict. And I will explain this further for you. For example, the United States tried to circumvent internet censorship in many countries like China. Well, actually, the United States spends $30 billion or more, on circumventing internet censorship. And actually, China has spent more money to fight back. And actually, I'm going to quote Michael P. Dehan, a member of the BBG, who said, if we figure out how to breach the Chinese firewall with X dollars, they can spend 100 times X dollars and divert their resources to figuring out how to plug the hole. The second argument would be that governments should have the freedom and the right to protect their people. And they enable censorship to protect their citizens. And I would like to go back to the definition of censorship, which is that deleting some harmful materials in the internet. We're not talking about here freedom of speech and speeches or something like that, but we're talking about harmful materials like child pornography, like hate speech, which can lead in some cases in terrorism. And I think that these governments have the right to protect their people, whether a religious government or conservative governments who are censoring porn or anything that's not moral, or other governments that are censoring sites that may be promoting hate speech like terrorism. Actually, there are more than 10,000 videos on the internet that are promoting for terrorism in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria. And they are really promoting hate speech. And many people in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya are going there, because these people blinded them with this hate speech, and as a result of this, they went, and they're young, they're foolish, they cannot understand that exactly, so they went to, and which made terrorism more like an international event. The second thing, which is that it is not legitimate for foreign countries to interfere in other countries' affairs. And I'll explain to you this, it is not legitimate for outside actors to impose their own ideas of how much censorship there should be, because every country has the right to make its own policies. And the United Nations Charter emphasizes nothing contained in the present charter shall authorize the United Nations to interfere in matters which are essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of an state. Within a state, only the government is legitimate as the supreme authority within its territory. And the second thing, this policy is not counterproductive, and it is counterproductive, and it is not essential, because actually in many countries, like Tunisia or Egypt or other countries, when they made a revolution, most of the mechanisms they used for internet censorship, for circumventing internet censorship, were made in those countries. There are private developers that develop some softwares that help them to circumvent internet censorship. And they are from that country where there is censorship. So there is no need for foreign interference in that country. And actually, your team said that there is talked a lot about freedom of speech and many things like that, where I don't think that censoring the internet will actually be a threat to freedom of speech, because people would fight for freedom of speech, and if those people think that there is a danger to their human rights in their countries, they will revolt and they will demand. And actually, there is no case where in a country people demand their rights and it failed. Okay, the last thing is, I would like to put a burden of proof on the affirmative team. I would like you to explain us how this policy is going to work. How can you affirm, and how can you actually say that no one is going to control it, no one is going to manipulate it? How is this policy a very beneficial policy, and how can it work? I would like you to explain us how this policy is going to be efficient, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir, for your speech. Now, we have a couple of questions for you. So, just for clarification purposes, can you just relabel your constructive arguments for your case?
My constructive argument for my case is that circumventing internet censorship is not a legitimate foreign policy, because it is aggressive. Not only aggressive, but also it interferes in other countries' affairs, and also it is against the will of the people.
Okay. All right, so that's it?
Yes.
Okay. So another question. So you say that circumvention is too aggressive of a foreign policy tool, right?
No, I said it's too aggressive to be a legitimate foreign policy tool.
Okay, so it's too aggressive to be a legitimate foreign policy tool.
Yes.
So is military intervention as legitimized under the United Nations a foreign policy tool that is too aggressive?
But actually, the interference, this kind of interference, are aggressive. I cannot deny that. But it is more complicated, and besides, we're talking about the United Nations here, because it's not like a country interfering in another country's business. It's the international society and the international community is.
All right, I understand. Okay, so another question. So should we have intervened in the Rwandan genocide?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Should we have intervened in the Rwandan genocide? Should we have intervened in the genocide that happened in Rwanda, where ethnic groups were cleansed out, where ethnic cleansing happened?
Well, if we could save it or make things better, yes, we should. But actually, sometimes when we interfere, we can make things worse.
Okay, so
it's like what happens.
Okay, so but you realize that many people were killed in the Rwandan genocide, and foreign governments were criticized because they took no effective action in preventing this kind of genocide.
Yes, as I also know that there is a possibility that the situation could have been worse if they did.
Okay, so it was not justified for us. So it would not be justified for us to violate the sovereignty of a nation when that nation is committing genocide to its people. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not what I'm saying.
Okay, so then can you clarify your response?
I already did, but I will do it again. I said that you don't have anything to confirm that it is not going to make things worse.
All right. Okay. So national sovereignty. So in your definition, national sovereignty is absolute in all circumstances.
What?
So do nations have a right to keep their sovereignty in all circumstances, no matter what the situation is, that they have a right to keep their sovereignty?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So another question I have for you is: do governments use internet censorship to control their people?
No, they are just going to protect their people.
They use internet censorship to protect their people.
Yes, in most cases.
Okay, so when internet censorship is used to oppress its people, then is that wrong? Or can internet censorship be used to oppress its people?
It depends.
It depends.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so if we demonstrate to you in a case where internet censorship can be used to oppress its people, then can we win this round?
Would you repeat the question again?
If we demonstrate that internet censorship can be used to oppress the people of the nation, then can we win this round?
No, actually not. Because we're talking if it's legitimate or illegitimate. We are not totally against this foreign policy, we are against its legitimacy. It can be a foreign policy and illegitimate. Thank you.
Do Do you need time?
Wait, go in. Yeah, I'll take 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
How much time do I have left?
2:30 used. So
Oh,
you
2:30
have.
used?
Yeah, so you have 5.5 minutes.
Okay, I'll use another 30 seconds.
Okay. Three minutes.
Where's the... Ready? Ladies and gentlemen, we argue for humanity. We argue for a world in which a nation's political ideologies do not dictate whether its citizens deserve the most basic human rights, where the loss of human dignity is not only a problem for one population but for the entire human race. But ladies and gentlemen, today exists a world where nations are responsible for millions of lost lives, where the best interests of the citizens in the state do not coincide. But because that affirmative wants to restore humanity back into the international community by making sure that we protect the rights of an individual over the greed of a dictatorial regime, we affirm the motion that actively circumventing internet censorship is a legitimate foreign policy tool. And today, as the second affirmative speaker, I'm first of all going to explain why side negative's contention does not make sense and then go back to reconstructing our own. So first of all, side negative comes up and tells you that circumvention is very aggressive. However, ladies and gentlemen, in the cross-examination session, when asked if military intervention is justified, they say yes, because it's committed by the international community. But ladies and gentlemen, what we need to realize here is the fact that circumvention genocide, and we think that military intervention, which kills millions of people, millions of innocent civilians, is a lot more aggressive than circumvention. And thus we think that according to Negative's logic, that circumvention completely makes sense. And then they give you this idea about how the United States spent $13 billion to circumvent internet censorship in China, and how China used a lot more money to fight back. But first of all, we say, ladies and gentlemen, that just because we think and we're afraid that nations are going to fight back towards circumvention doesn't necessarily mean that we don't take any action. When we see millions of people dying, not able to self-actualize, and they're having their human rights stripped away with censorship. And second of all, we say that the places with most human rights violations led by censorship are countries in the Middle East, countries in Africa, who we don't think has as much money as China, which is a growing economic power, and we don't think that their example can apply at all. Second of all, they give you this idea about how nations have the right to protect people. But ladies and gentlemen, the word harmful in a dictatorial regime isn't necessarily the standard that we put the word harmful in today's society. Something harmful to a dictatorial regime, ladies and gentlemen, refers to something that has a direct oppression on its power, ladies and gentlemen. We think that dictatorial regimes oppress their people just to be in power. And we think that something harmful considered to them is something that's going to affect that power and trying to stop that power. And we think that pornography and things like that isn't necessarily something that's going to come as a threat to these dictatorial regimes. Thus, we don't think that side negative's arguments stand. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, we can also limit how much we circumvent of the internet. We're not going to completely free the internet of all information, including hate speech, including things like terrorism. We think that the nations who are implementing this internet censorship have a limit on how much of the internet censorship that they're going to circumvent, and we think that it's going to be a very reasonable amount. Last of all, they give you this idea about how national sovereignty is very important. They say that domestic policies must be respected if the government is legitimate. The key point here, ladies and gentlemen, is that we need to respect national sovereignty if the government is legitimate. We say in our first case, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, that we're going to only circumvent internet censorship with governments who have dictatorial regimes who don't uphold the primal purpose of what a legitimate state is. Second of all, we say, ladies and gentlemen, that if these governments are not legitimate, we don't have to respect their domestic policies, because their domestic policies are in direct contradiction with international law and human dignity. And then they come up and say that this is actually against the will of the people, that the people don't want to self-actualize, that the people don't want this information. However, ladies and gentlemen, according to the Washington Post in 2009, quote, U.S.-funded circumvention programs are increasingly finding a ready audience in repressive countries with over 1 million people a day using such tools. And we see that this completely contradicts what they have said thus far. Now, when this side negative comes up and says, the side affirmative has to prove that this will actually work. And we think that this is pretty easy to do, considering the fact the side negative did not rebut any of our arguments. So let's go back to the affirmative case and explain to you what we've actually said today. We first will set you a context of what this policy is going to do. We're only going to use this policy, ladies and gentlemen, if we understand that these dictatorial regimes are using policies that are completely against international law, completely against human dignity. We first will talk about the problems outlined in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. We give you the idea that today in today's globalized world, we need to find solutions to combat problems to make sure that we have solutions for internet censorship that's depriving people of the right to self-actualize. Second of all, we tell you that it's going to actively enhance human rights, ladies and gentlemen. We're not going to circumvent things like internet pornography, which is censored. We're going to make sure that we're only circumventing things that are in direct contradiction to dignity and that are stripping off the people's rights and the most fundamental rights. And last of all, we give you this idea of how the violation of national sovereignty is completely justified under the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. We give you the example in the cross-examination of Rwanda, ladies and gentlemen, where the UN actually authorized this intervention because they understood the human dignity being stripped off of many, many people. And we see that this is something that's going on in the status quo. And thus, ladies and gentlemen, for the sake of humanity, we beg to affirm.
How much? 1 minute. 1 minute.
Can I take this? Hello.
So would you give me the definition of international community?
The international community is a bunch of nations in the world interacting with each other in a positive way.
Okay, so do you believe that the international community can have circumvent between censorship? That's what you said.
Yes, we think it's very possible.
Okay, please define foreign policy.
Foreign policy, as we've explained in our previous cross-examination session, is a mechanism in which we use to extend our foreign policies while making sure that there's no significant harm to the international
By we, what
community.
do you mean by we?
By we?
Yes.
A nation or different nations?
Well, actually, foreign policy is a nation's policy.
Well, we would like to disagree, but if you say that, okay?
No, actually not. No, if you really look for a definition of foreign policy, it considers every nation. It's not a bunch of nations in the world. Okay, so this is
Right,
please. I think that you contradict yourself because you misunderstood the definition of international community and each country. The international community is a bunch of countries, and actually our team is not against, like organizing an international community and international organizations that actually circumvents internet censorship. They are against it. No, I'm not misunderstanding, please.
No,
So much
you're
cross-examination, please.
misunderstanding.
Let me explain to you
Go
something.
ahead.
No. You said international community. An international community is a bunch of governments. It's an international organization.
Yes.
So it is not one country. So there is a difference legitimatizing the circumvention as a foreign policy tool that every country uses, because that's what foreign policy means.
Sir?
Every country has a
Sir?
foreign policy, and by foreign policy here we mean
Sir?
what?
Can I
Yes?
respond to that?
Yeah, very fine.
Okay, so what you're saying is that in your case, in your previous cross-examination, you clearly said that
Okay,
military
let's move,
intervention.
Okay.
Sir, I haven't answered your question.
Well, I move to the next question.
Okay.
Can you guarantee that this policy works? That there won't be any manipulations?
Yes, we can guarantee that this will work.
Okay, you talked about Africa, that it is a poor country and it's not fight back like China, yes?
Well, Africa isn't a country, but yes.
Yes, African countries that are poor. African countries where thousands every day die from hunger, and they are fighting for the freedom of speech and for internet and for not censoring the internet. And they are African. Yes, they die every day because they don't have enough food and because they're really poor. And at the same time, they are fighting for internet censorship. Well, actually, that's
No,
what
we're saying that they're not fighting for internet censorship. That's why we want to circumvent it, because we don't like
So, do you believe that China is an oppressive government?
in certain cases, that's very debatable.
Well,
If
because
you want to explain it,
China
then
is
you have
the
to.
symbol of internet censorship.
Pardon?
China is actually the biggest country in the world that uses internet censorship.
Well, China has.
And actually, 85.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
95% okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
You have 4 minutes left.
1 minute.
Minutes left.
affirmative team speech, that they turned this all this debate into a moral debate. Therefore, defending what they call democracy and human rights, completely ignoring our burden of proof that we requested from them, which is how this thing will work on the field, on the practical field. Because all you do in your speeches is talk about morals, is talk about human rights, is talk about democracy, which is not the case in here, because we're not debating on a moral or values debate. It's about how this thing is going to work on the field. It's about how to make it practical, how to ensure that it is not used in the wrong hands to actually deny people their freedom of expression or to actually use it in terrorist or cyber attacks. But you completely ignored our request. So we'll move on to show you contradict yourself in defending your democracy. Now, let's start this by a general truth. Everything is a matter of perspective. We all have different backgrounds, religious background, cultural backgrounds. Therefore, our vision of the truth, or what's moral, is not the same. It differs from one individual and another. It differs from one country to another. Now, let's take a closer look at the concept of democracy, which, by the way, you have been defending with such aggressiveness. Democracy, of course, is a Greek concept, originally pronounced demos kratos. Demos is the people. Kratos, of course, means power. Democracy is all about giving the power to the people. Now, if we combine that with the general truth of everything is a matter of perspective, we get into a little bit of mix-up. Why is that? Because it's not up to decide, it's not up to outside powers to decide what is and what is not in the interest of certain people. It is their own people choice to decide whether something is good for them or something is bad for them. And therefore, those who might see themselves promoting some human rights or promoting democracy in the world might be seen by the people as interference of their own, of their national policy. They are pushing, for example, I'll just give an example. If you take a look at what Chinese people in 209 thought about the government's performance, we'll see that over 95% of the people are not really interested in making a more democratic republic. They are fully satisfied with how their country works. And therefore, who are you as a foreign country to decide what's good for the Chinese people and what's bad for them? They made their own choice, and this is the concept of democracy itself. This is the concept of democracy, the power to the people. If some people are not interested in what you are interested to as a foreign country which have different backgrounds, then they are not obliged to submit to your vision of truth. It is their own vision of truth that matters. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is that what we should respect. This is what they do not respect, as they think of themselves as the owners of the truth, the owners of how the world can be a better place, which, of course, is a matter of perspective. Another little argument, another little example is censoring pornography in, for example, Muslim countries. Now, as Muslim people do not have the right to go into pornography sites according to their beliefs. Now, who are you to actually defy these beliefs and order to circumvent the censorship of pornographic sites? As a Muslim adult, as a Muslim parent, I do not want my child to go into a pornography site. Who are you to actually give my child the chance to do so? Thank you. Please.
You have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll use a minute. 1 minute. I think we're ready.
Okay. So you will still have 4 minutes left.
Okay. So now you talk about perspective and how people have the right to make their own decisions. However, when we're circumventing internet censorship, where in there does it necessarily say that we're forcing democratic ideals on people?
It's not necessarily forcing, but it could be forcing.
So
because
it's
some
not
people do
necessarily
not share the same vision as you do.
right. But in order to expose people to these different perspectives and views, they have to have access to information to be exposed to different perspectives, correct?
Yeah, but they
Right,
chose
so-
their own perspective
Right.
as the different
Right, but in order to support that, enhance that, to those perspectives, they have to have access to information, which would be allowed by circumventing censorship.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but everybody knows what
Okay, thank you.
democracy is all about.
But we're not talking about democracy, and not one time in any of our speeches did we talk about forcing democratic ideals onto another country. Now, may I ask another question, please? Okay, so you make a distinction between legitimate foreign policy tools and illegitimate foreign policy tools, correct? And you believe in addressing this resolution on a real world, on a pragmatic level, correct? So at the point at which you deem that this tool is illegitimate, no country can actively support circumventing internet censorship.
Right, no country should actually circumvent internet censorship.
Okay.
No country should.
Even if the country is being oppressive, millions of people are dying, and nearly 1 million people a day in these various developing countries are demanding or requesting the United States to support them in circumventing censorship.
It's up to the people.
Right, but
If
these-
they found
right.
that if they found that the government is not actually representing them, it's up to the people actually to reverse
Right,
this thing.
but okay, so
it's not
once
up
the
to
people,
you.
okay, right. So once these people make the decision that their government is oppressive, is it then okay for us to give them the tools to realize what they want?
But no, the problem is that you are giving them something, you're giving them the perspective that they are not convinced.
But are you aware that 1 million people a day are asking and requesting the circumvention tool? So at that point, these people have decided that their government is oppressive, that they want to circumvent the censorship, and at that point, as you emphasize, you have
I
to
mentioned
what
the
they
counter
want.
example,
and
which
that
is
is
China.
not a legitimate foreign policy tool.
I mentioned the counter example, at least we see China. 95% of these people do not actually think that their governments are not interested in a more democratic republic.
Right,
They're
but
actually
again,
satisfied.
right, but does the resolution limit, is it limited to China, or does it also apply to oppressive countries such as North America and Cuba?
We're actually talking about something worldwide. So yes,
Right,
we should actually look at the little minorities.
So in other countries where the majority of people do not want the censorship upon them, is it okay for them to circumvent internet censorship? and
They
the
can
government-
fight for themselves, they're grown-ups.
Right, but okay, so would you say that in North Korea the citizens have the ability to promote everything that they desire?
They can actually fight for themselves. That's what I said.
So it's okay.
Not
I'm
necessarily.
sorry, you
by
are not
circumventing
allowed to
internet.
ask
There are
any
other
more
tools.
questions. So the affirmatives have 4 minutes left.
Okay, we'll give all the time.
You have 1 minute left.
Thank you.
Seconds. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I want to talk to you about justice, because justice is what precisely motivates our side of the house today. And side opposition seems to be kind of confusing our model today. We're not just talking about democracy, we're talking about the improvement of human rights. And in the current world, we see that there's a problem with the improvement and maintenance of human rights. We see that human rights are not being followed by every country in the world. We see that there's a huge problem to this. So I'm first going to talk to you about whether side negative fulfill their burdens. I'm going to talk to you about the case shifts and contradictions in their case. I'm then going to talk to you about the border issues in this round. So let's talk about the burdens that we placed on side negative. We told you that they had to prove either the following: that 1, national sovereignty is absolute, and 2, that human rights will not increase by passing the motion. Let's look at the first burden, that national sovereignty is absolute. Well, they say that national sovereignty is kind of absolute, but not kind of absolute. They say that national sovereignty, that every country has cultural values, therefore we need to respect their national sovereignty. Well, we say first, in response to that, that when you contradict international law, you have a responsibility to protect that international law. But if you contradict that international law, you are not placed under the justice system of what the international community does. We think there's a justification as to why some dictators are not considered to be under international law. Let's talk about whether that human rights will not increase by passing the motion. Now they keep talking about democracy, how our resolution only pertains to democracy. They say that China, that 95% of people do not oppose to.
Can you please fix this?
It's not me.
So how do we? I don't think it's really fair. So what do we do?
Should have the mic.
Yeah, we can't hear anything.
If it's
Oh god, it's getting louder.
sorry.
Is it the mic?
It's from the mic.
I think so.
Okay.
How do you turn it
I don't know.
Oh, it's going away.
We didn't turn it on.
on? Stay away. Stay away each other.
Sorry, it.
Keep going.
Okay.
So should I just start my speech all over again, or?
No,
You continue.
just continue, please.
Talk about
So
what we're
think
talking
about you can think about where you wanna start, but I already have 1 minute and 35 seconds. So just
Can I tell her where she left off?
yeah.
Okay, you left off when you were talking about like the
China.
95% of the people in
China.
China.
Was listening.
Okay, so can you, we're gonna time and stuff, right? Alright. Okay, so then you talk about how China, that 90% of its people actually agree to censorship. That they agree to censorship because they oppose democracy and that we can't impose our cultural values on them. Well, we're we're saying that this resolution is not unique to democracy. What we want to do is increase human rights. Now they also talk about how this debate is actually based on practicality, that is based on pragmatic values and not based on principle. Well, we have two responses to this. First of all, we say that our debate and our motion, that plan that we set for you today, is actually encompassing both principle and practical value. We're saying that in principle, human rights must always be upheld, and that's something that every country must follow. But in practicality, we see many circumstances where people actually oppose internet censorship because that's a way for the government to control its people. And when the government has more options to control its people, then that's the point when the citizens feel that there is a huge problem in their country. That's when they ask for circumventing tools. As we have shown in our evidence, that is when people actually say that 1 million people a day ask for circumventing tools in order to improve the human rights situation in their country and oppose the dictatorial regime that's oppressing its people. Now let's talk about the contradictions in a negative pace. Now they first told you that foreign policy is only used by one country. But during cross-examination, they say that military intervention is a foreign policy, and that's used by the international community, by the United Nations, as we already know. This means that they concede to the principle that circumvention is a foreign policy used by the international community. If it's used by the international community, we can accept that it is a legitimate foreign policy tool, that it is a legitimate way for improving human rights. Now let's talk about the voter issues in this round. First of all, we want to talk about what is the nature of our plan. Now we're saying that if the nature of a plan is to actually impose circumvention as a tool as one of the tools in our toolbox for letting people know that they can have different perspectives. So if circumvention is going to be used as a threat to the government, and the government says, okay, we're going to improve the human rights situation in their country, then we say that's a good situation. Second of all, if the government refuses to increase the human rights in their country, then we say that it is legitimate for the people in that country to rise up against the government using the circumvention tools that we gave them, because that gives them different perspectives, that gives them the legitimacy, the freedom that they want in the first place. We think that this is very legitimate. Let's talk about the second question, the second voter issue that we need to answer in order to win this round. Now are we saying that internet circumvention is justified in all circumstances? We're saying that's no. Internet circumvention is not justified in all circumstances. However, we clearly define to you in this motion when it is justified. We think the side negative has failed to really understand that. We know that people need to know information to gain perspectives and make opinions. We're not forcing democratic values, but we're giving people an opinion, different chances for making opinions. So the third question that needs to be answered is, does the nature of the status quo necessitate an increase in human rights? We think this is yes, because we say that we gave you examples of where people are oppressed, and that we think this oppression is wrong. We think in principle this is wrong, and practical values, they didn't actually specify any cases where their hypothetical situations actually worked. We gave you situations where our situations actually happened in the first place, and that was empirical evidence. So what have we shown you today? So because we have fulfilled responsibilities by showing you that human rights will improve and that it is justified to violate national sovereignty in certain cases, and because we think that the rights of the individual always precede the rights of a dictatorship, and because we agree to all of the motions, agree to all of the principles that we showed you today, we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
How much time left?
You have 3 minutes now.
We'll take.
1 minute left. Your time is up.
You can start. Okay. The other team said that this that circumventing internet censorship and making it a legitimate foreign policy tool should be, it is legitimate or should be legitimate in order to help people in autocratic regimes. And we said that foreign states are not the legitimate representative of the people. It is not legitimate for them to set themselves up as arbiter of those whom it believes are being deprived of rights. It is not up to outside powers to decide what is not in the interest of people but their own. And secondly, the affirmative team said that by making circumventing internet censorship legitimate, they are promoting some kind of human rights. And they only emphasize on one right, which is the freedom of speech, and ignored that the word is benefiting of all the other rights. But we said, in practice, they are pushing their own ideas on other people that may not share the same ideas. And we mentioned the example of Chinese people. They don't want a democratic country. They are satisfied with their country. So by circumventing internet censorship and making it legitimate, you are pushing your own ideas on other people that may not share them. The other team also said that the foreign policy or any kind of intervention should be harmful. While we said should not be harmful, excuse me. While we said the foreign states that are meddling in the affairs of others cannot know the full consequences of their actions. Circumventing censorship could end up simply creating more problems, because there is nothing that guarantees that internet censorship tools don't be used in a harmful way. There is nothing that guarantees that. Moreover, the other team talked about the international community. And we said that foreign policy is something that is related to each country on its own. So because they didn't tell us how they're gonna make a foreign policy for the whole world, for the international community, we are ignoring that argument. To finish my speech, let me emphasize on the fact that we put a burden of proof on the affirmative team to demonstrate if by making internet censorship legitimate, how can it be done? Is it feasible? How can we control it? How can you guarantee that the intervention wouldn't be harmful to the people? Without the other team giving us any practical solution, then in this case, bigger and richer states could be able to prey on the weaker ones, this cannot simply be put aside because one state doesn't like how the other state runs its own internet affairs. Because the other team didn't answer our burden of proof and didn't give a feasible, practical solution, we think our state should stand. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the debate. We will need some time to finalize our decision. So if we may ask you to leave the room, or maybe just go to the back side of the room, and then we will call you when we have our decision ready.
No, you don't have to. You can stay.